You're very welcome along to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. We're back. Hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas break and a cracking Christmas racing, which we're going to have to split into a couple of shows, but more on that in a second. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and delighted to be joined this week and every week leading up to the festival by Matt Tombs and Donn McClean. The idea of the show is ultimately to build up to the Cheltenham Festival, notwithstanding the incredible racing going on before that. But we are looking at some trends or key trends for the festival and also some later races like likes of the Grand National as well. So it's basically a review of the Christmas period, but also looking ahead to Cheltenham and later in the year as well. It'll be a great listen and well worth staying tuned. Before we get going, we see a lot of people over the last couple of months, particularly from the racing side of things, take advantage of our new sign-up offer. If you take the bonus code POD50, POD50, it's our most generous offer right now, and you get £50 worth in free bets. More info available on screen now. You can see the T's and C's or head to matchbook.com/promotions. So what we did last year, guys, we split it, hurdles, chases over a couple of weeks, because otherwise we're looking at a 2.5 hour show. So no pads at the ready, listeners, and apologies, we will only get to the hurdles races this week. It was just the way we wanted to split it. So Matt, we're going to start with a race you were at, the Christmas hurdle, which was also King George Day. So your thoughts on that day itself, your Christmas break, and then take it away with some trends and your thoughts on the Christmas hurdle specifically, which starts with Sir Gino.
Yeah, I had a cracking day at Kempton. Obviously, the course is under threat, so it was absolutely packed, which was brilliant. But the facility stood up okay, I think. Obviously, a few people thinking it might be the last chance they get to go there. Let's hope that's not the case, and something could be done to the Jockey Club, maybe buy out the option that Red Row have, because the King George, which we'll come to next week, was an absolutely fantastic race, and it was on good ground. And at this time of year, around that track at Kempton, it's such a different test to most of the other Grade 1 staying chases. It's a huge part of the calendar, and it'd be such a shame if it wasn't there anymore. So I had a cracking day, and including the Christmas hurdle, which was Sir Gino was fantastic. And this is a strong race. Runners 12 from 91 at the festival, 41% profit. And I think Kempton at 2 miles provides a much better trial for Cheltenham than at 3 miles. I think that's because over 2 miles at Cheltenham, whether over hurdles or fences, raw speed is so much a factor. Good horses who jump well don't finish tired. Over 3 miles, stamina is so important at Cheltenham. So horses do finish tired, and the test at Kempton in races like the King George might become less of a good guide. But the Christmas hurdles produced 8 champion hurdle winners this century, 4 of which did the double. And Sir Gino's favourite for that now, he nearly died last year. So to have brought him back, seemingly with all his ability intact, a brilliant effort from the Seven Barrows team. He's such a fast horse. He was keen here after a year off, wasted plenty of energy, still beat the race fit reigning champion easily. He's inclined to give his hurdles plenty of air. Speed lost in the race IQ data, 3.92 miles an hour per hurdle. The next 4 home were all below 3 miles an hour. Perhaps that run under his belt will get slicker now, but he was inclined to give his hurdles lots of air even before he went chasing. Perhaps he's so good it won't matter. We've seen ordinary jumpers like Faheen just outclass the champion hurdle field, and Sir Gino does look a fantastic racehorse. But it's a bit of a concern, especially if more of an emphasis on stamina at Cheltenham. Will that suit him as well as the likes of Lossiemouth or Brighter Days Ahead should the mares run? And the way he jumps both sets of obstacles, you'd say he'd be a better chaser. The champion hurdle looks a weaker race, so you can see why they're strongly leaning towards it. I think that's where he'll run, but I don't think it's as clear-cut as most people do. If they get Constitution Hill back, especially if he's bolted up in the Beulah or the Kingwell, and he's clearly a player rather than just going directly to the festival on a wing and a prayer, they may decide to split them up. I doubt Nicky would want his 2 guns taking each other on. Nico certainly wouldn't. So I can't imagine Sir Gino would go to the champion chase without running over fences first. Game Spirit looked the viable prep. He was entered in the champion chase this morning. So it's therefore worth keeping an eye on the vibes for both horses. Things could change, and brilliant though Sir Gino is, I therefore wouldn't be piling into the 2.63 at the moment for the champion hurdle. Golden Ace, no answers to Sir Gino's speed here, but she excels at Cheltenham at around the minimum trip. Might give him more of a race there. And with Lossiemouth Brighter Days Ahead, potentially in the mare's hurdle, the new lion needing to prove himself at this level, there's an argument for saying Golden Ace is the each-way value at around 17.0. Very likely to turn up, run a race, in which case good chance of being in the first 3. But from a betting point of view, I just want to get a bit more of a sense of running plans before betting in the champion and mare's hurdle markets.
Yeah, Don, and we'll get to all the Irish horses in a second because we're covering the December hurdle afterwards. But Sergino, firstly, it was great to see him back, and the vibes were good going into the race despite the well-documented health issues. And it was great to see a superstar like that absolutely bolting.
Yeah, no, like it was a really impressive performance, Dan. Like I thought that he was underpriced. I thought 4 to 7 or thereabouts about him was too short, given that he was coming back after his long break, after, as Matt said, a big health scare. The fact that the last time we saw him was over fences, and that he'd only been rerouted to hurdles because of Constitution Hill, and sent on here. Plus, he was keen through the early part of the race. I thought he did really well to win as well as he did, given how keen he raced. And you can understand that he was keen, given that it was his first run back in so long. But his sectionals were really good as well. Like he was 52.53 seconds through the final 4 furlongs, according to Race IQ, which was over a second faster than Golden Ace was, and Golden Ace was second fastest, and that was after racing keenly through the early part of the race, and Golden Ace, the champion hurdle winner. So it was a big performance. Even his final furlong was just over 14 seconds, which is 0.68 faster than the second fastest. So he saw out his race really well after racing keenly. As Matt was saying, he can only come forward from his first run back over hurdles since he won the Fighting Fifth hurdle back in November last year. So over 13 months since his last run over hurdles, 12 months since his last run over fences. But no, I think it was very difficult to fault this performance. He's going to be better when he with this race under his belt, probably with the freshness out of him, when he'll probably settle better. Plus he led from the third flight. Probably suits him better to be held up in behind and delivered late. So no, I thought this was a massive performance. And he's just turned 6 now. So still a very young horse, but it is really interesting, as Matt was saying, where he's going to go now. And obviously significant that he was entering the champion chase this morning. And the champion hurdle, yeah, the pieces still have to fit in together. Champion chase likewise, and we'll come on to the chasers next week, but it's not a very clear-cut picture either in the champion chase. Just a couple of pockets of weakness in there as well. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he goes, or where he goes. Golden Ace, likewise, she ran well. Probably wouldn't have suited her good ground at Kempton over 2 miles. So stiffer track, maybe a little bit of cut in the ground. Back at Cheltenham, our best runs have been at Cheltenham and Newcastle. Stiff finish at Newcastle as well. So she and Jeremy Scott seem to be really happy with this run. So she'll go on to the champion hurdle as well. At least we know where she's going. But yeah, like I any Sergino fans or Sergino anti-post docket holders couldn't have been but happy with this performance. I thought he did all that he needed to do. And as you say, Dan, great to see him back.
Okay, yeah, and we're covering that division, so we're going to stick with that, and maybe Don get the Irish view first, and then lead into Matt's trends. Then so Lossiemouth, how impressed were you? I mean, just take her purely on her 2 miles form. Has she gotten better and better over 2 miles, or would you have any question marks there at all? I mean, it was a great performance in the end, but brighter days ahead, I guess. Could take a lot of positives from that too.
Yeah, I know lots going on here as well. And yeah, I kind of always had Lossiemouth down as more, obviously adept over both trips, but more a 2.5 mile, because she stays 2.5 miles. I think if a horse stays a trip, then it's probable that that's his or her best trip. But look, she's so effective over 2 miles, and you could see when Anzadam went on down the back straight, you can see why Patrick Mullins allowed him stride on. He just wasn't settling in behind, and it's a second run of the season as well. He ran the 5 and 5th hurdle at Newcastle as well. Was only just beaten by Golden Ace in that. I thought he'd come forward from that, but he just didn't settle. Then Patrick Mullins allowed him stride on the run down the back straight. I'm sure with the objective of allowing him the option to go and settle in front. But he just probably expended too much energy through that part of the race, and in the end he was done for third place by Cashel Lad. But Lossiemouth, yeah, very difficult to fault her performance. Paul Townend, he was saying afterwards that when Anzadam went on, he couldn't let Anzadam too much rope. He couldn't let him go clear, so he had to use up Lossiemouth a little bit in order to just not to chase him, but just to make sure the gap didn't grow to an insurmountable margin. But Lossiemouth was really good. She quickened up smartly and won really well. Brighter days ahead, yeah, like. This was a big performance from Brighter Days Ahead, and it was good to see her put up this performance. Like her season kind of petered out at the end of last season, and as has been well documented, she was going chasing this season. And Gordon Elliott just said that she had a little bit of a setback in the early part of the season. And it was interesting as well. He was saying afterwards he thought that she might be out for a couple of days, but suddenly a couple of days led to a couple of weeks, and then by the time he was getting her back, the chase, her season was getting old, so it's very late for a novice to be going over fences and blowing her novice status. So you can see all the reasons why they kept her over hurdles, and she justified that decision. It was a big run. She kind of closed on Lossiemouth on the run in, and then she got to within less than a length, probably about 3/4 of a length, halfway up the run in. But then it was interesting that Lossiemouth was going away again close home. But that was her first run back after a long break, and even Gordon Elliott saying afterwards that they were very cognizant of that. They didn't want to, go eyeballs out for the whole way and give her a chance to go and win the race. But in the end, you can see that once Jack Kennedy saw that she couldn't get to Lossiemouth and Lossiemouth was going away again, he just kind of accepted that he was going to finish second. But you can see her coming forward from this, and if they both line up in the Irish Champion Hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival, there's only a length between them. Lossiemouth probably won with a little bit more than the bare winning margin in hand, but you can see brighter days ahead getting closer to her in the Irish Champion Hurdle. I think with this run under her belt. Cashel Lad ran a big race as well. He ran a massive race in the Hatton's Grace Hurdle, and he proved that he belonged in this grade. He's rated £11 inferior to the two mares, and he was obviously giving them the £7 mares allowance, but he ran well. And Anzadam, I wouldn't give up on Anzadam yet. Still think there's a top class horse in there. It's only a 6th run over hurdles. He's only just turned 6, and if he could maybe in a better race with a faster pace, if he can just settle a little bit better, and again with this run under his belt, he's still really inexperienced. So if he can just settle a little bit better than he did here, then he could take a good step forward. But I think the main positive from this race, Dan, for me, is brighter days ahead. I thought she ran a massive race, and I think she can come forward from this.
Okay, yeah, Matt, and on brighter days ahead, I mean, we obviously will get to mention this throughout the show, but it was a fantastic Christmas for Gordon Elliott, and I think the stats back up it wasn't a bad Christmas for Willie Mullins, rather just an exceptional Christmas for Gordon Elliott. And I guess brighter days ahead was, even though she didn't win, she couldn't really have done much more in defeat there, I would say.
Absolutely fantastic Gordon Elliott performance. 18 winners at Leopardstown, Limerick and Down Royal over those 4 days, 3 Grade 1 winners. As you say, Willie did okay, 9 winners. He only had 7 last year. Different sort of mentality, I think, Willie, to the previous season where he had about 15, 16. Does look as if he is, particularly with his novice hurdlers, going later and later in the season to get them going. So that'll be an interesting fact we can discuss later. I'd absolutely echo everything Don said about Lossiemouth and brighter days ahead. I think this was yet another reason why you don't need semi-finals and finals. You can have more than one final. This was a final, and then for all the reasons Don said, the Irish Champion Hurdle is now a mouth-watering prospect. So this is a decent Champion Hurdle guide, 5 from 21 this century, 8 of the losers placed. Unsurprisingly, they go off quite short prices, so it's loss-making to follow. But whilst historically it's been the later trials that have been numerically the best trial for the Champion Hurdle, the Irish Champion Hurdle with 9 winners, or the most profitable trial, the Kingwell Hurdle, 87% profit on runners. This has been a solid guide. I think it would be interesting to have a quick debate about what is going to happen now with Lossiemouth, because Paul Townend seemed to be angling after the Mare's Hurdle afterwards. And the context is that, surprisingly, Willie seems to have sent all his other main contenders chasing. You may not be surprised at that if you think that the plan has always been the Mare's Hurdle for Lossiemouth. I was surprised to see, say, Jade de Grugy over fences. So it'd be interesting to see if the vibes are she'll switch back after a couple of defeats to the smaller obstacles for the Mare's Hurdle. And Benny de Dieu had only run over fences for Willie. Vroom Vroom Mag won 6 in a row over fences for switching back to hurdles mid-season. So that could happen. But otherwise, it's hard to see him running Lossiemouth in the Champion Hurdle and having no realistic contender for the much more winnable Mare's Hurdle. I suppose if brighter days ahead trounces Lossiemouth at DRF and Michael O'Leary says she's going for the Mare's Hurdle, then Willie might think she's better off taking Lossiemouth to take on Sergino, but that's all pretty unlikely. So I suspect it'll be the Mare's Hurdle for Lossiemouth again. And where would that leave Willie's Champion Hurdle challenge? Are there anti-post opportunities on that basis? Amsterdam's enigmatic. He looked quirky at the business end in the fighting fifth. Far from straightforward here. I'd be a bit more forgiving of this. Don said very keen, and Patrick let him go. He then was ridden into the next and winged it. And on the worst of the ground on the inside rails, always using too much energy up. He may be a bit of a monkey, but he's 34.0 for the Champion Hurdle. And if he starts to behave himself, he does look to have the ability to play a part. If I'm right about Lossiemouth going for the mares, then whatever Paul rides for Willie and the Champion is going to crash in price. So they'd at very least be a back to lay play on the Matchbook Exchange. And the Donnellys have been happy to run their horses against each other. So I doubt the presence of Sergino would stop Amsterdam running. Willie was mooting running next time, making the running. And it'd be interesting to see someone like Danny Mullins try and do that in the Irish Champion Hurdle. He'll be dismissed by lots of punters, but he's one to keep an eye on.
Okay, yeah, fascinating how the next couple of months shape up, really, to be honest. Is it ever anything different? The Leopardstown Christmas Hurdle, Don, is over 3 miles, and this produced another brilliant race. And you could argue it's probably Tiapu's most impressive performance, or at least right up there.
Yeah, I think so. Like, what a performance, really. He came right away from his rivals. He beat Ballyburn by way further than he beat him in the Hatton's Grace Hurdle, and Ballyburn was sent off as favourite to reverse places, and that seemed to be the sentiment directly after the Hatton's Grace Hurdle. People were saying Ballyburn will beat him next time, but look, Tiapu, he's just such a stalwart. He's only just turned 9, which is really interesting. So the Stayers Hurdle, it's a young horse's race, but then, of course, Sieur de Burley won it a couple of years ago as an 11-year-old. Bob Ollinger won it last season, and we can say last year now as a 10-year-old. But when Sieur de Burley won it, he was the first double-digit winner since Crimson Embers in 1986. So it's kind of and those real top-class stairs, Solwit, Big Bucks, English Drever, even Galmoy, they all won it at 9, and then a couple of them went back to try and win it at 10. They couldn't do it. So Bob Ollinger is going to be 11 now. Sieur de Burley obviously won it at 11. Tiapu's only just turned 9, so that's an age at which the Stayers Hurdle is very much a legitimate target. So yeah, as you say, Dan, it was a big performance by Tiapu. The policy before this has been Hatton's Grace Hurdle straight to the Stayers Hurdle. Gordon Elliott did say after the Hatton's Grace he's going to campaign him a little bit more aggressively this season, and that's just going to the Christmas Hurdle, which he's won impressively. The only option now between now and Cheltenham is the Galmoy Hurdle, which he's not going to go to the Galmoy Hurdle, I think. So straight to the Stayers Hurdle. So no, big performance by Tiapu, and he's running 3 Stayers Hurdles. He's finished 3rd, 2nd, and 1st in those 3 Stayers Hurdles. So yeah, big player, big run by Bob Ollinger as well. The other Robcore horse, a 1-2 for Robcore in this race, a reversal of the 1-2 that they had in the Stayers Hurdle. And Bob Ollinger, yeah, like he ran a big race. I would have allowed him to finish a little bit further down the field, but he stayed on really well to take 2nd place behind Tiapu, in front of Ballyburn, in front of Home by the Lee, in front of the Yellow Clay, who ran a bit disappointingly again. I thought he might step forward or bounce back from his Lismullen Hurdle defeat, but he didn't. And the jury's out in the Yellow Clay now again. But it was a well-run race with a finishing speed of 99%, and Tiapu was fastest through through the final 4 furlongs and through the final furlong. So yeah, I just thought a rock solid performance from Tiapu.
Okay, Matt, you can hit us with your trend, and then maybe answer the question, as Gordon missed a trick a little bit with the campaigning of Tiapu, because I noticed there before the race that it is not just his first run in the Christmas Hurdle, but his first run ever at Leopardstown.
Yeah, and they were so adamant, weren't they, that he was best fresh. And he has won a Stayers Hurdle, having come off a fresh prep. If he actually runs a bit flat at Cheltenham this year, then Gordon will be vindicated what he's done before. It was great to see, because you do want to see these really good horses out. And this was just 28 days after Fairyhouse. So now they can campaign him more aggressively, which would be great. So about trends, overall this century, runners at the festival, 7 from 82, 52% profit. And this race encapsulates how the Irish Staying Hurdling division has been transformed in recent years. First 14 renewals this century, no festival winners. All 7 have come in the last 11 festivals. And since this became a Grade 1 in 2013, runners at the festival, 6 from 48, 142% profit. And it's produced 4 of the last 5 Stayers Hurdle winners. So what's interesting is that 3 of those 4 were beaten at Leopardstown. A bit like Lismullen we mentioned a few weeks ago. You need to be assessing the runners, not just the winner here, when analysing the Stayers Hurdle. You want the horse that's peaking in March, not at Christmas. But as Don said, strongly run race here. And Cheer Hoopu basically was well suited by that, I think, now. 3 seasons ago, he got outstayed in a strongly run race in the Stayers Hurdle. But he's now in his 6th season hurdling. And last year, he got done for toe in a steady run renewal by Bob Ollinger. So he stays the 3-mile trip really well now, which he didn't, I don't think, in his early days in the Stayers Hurdle. But he's still got the good tactical speed he showed in the Hatton's Grace. So he's hugely likeable, big player in the Stayers Hurdle. But as we'll come on to later, there are new kids on the block this year. So would you want to take 3.0 about a horse who's been beaten in what might well be weaker renewals of this on 2 of his 3 tries so far? I wouldn't. Bob Ollinger usually begins in the Lismullen, but seasonal debut here, ridden out the back, run on past beaten horses, really. Now 11, it'd be some effort to win the Stayers twice as a veteran. You get plenty of steadily run Stayers hurdles, and that would really suit him. You think now Jack Kennedy will make sure that wouldn't happen again this year. So 11.0 for him looks about right. Apparently Ballyburn didn't want to leave the paddock, not for the first time in recent starts. He looks a little bit quirky as well as keen. It always looked to me as if he'd be too keen to get home in a top 3 mile race, so it proved. Even with a good gallop, he was very keen. So I don't buy the argument he was beaten a long way out here. I mean, Cheer Hoopu looked to be going as fast as he could with half a mile to go, but he just kept galloping. And I remember how fast a horse Ballyburn looked in the Brave Inca and the Bearing Bingham. That was 2 seasons ago. So you either keep him for races like the Boyne and Aintree hurdles, or you gamble and stick him in the Irish Champion hurdle and let him roll and see what happens. Maybe he just isn't the same horse after trying chasing and now staying hurdling, but it's worth a try. He's 34.0 for the Champion hurdle, and as we discussed, Willie may need a runner for that. And the Yellow Clay never went a yard here. We surmised at the time whether he had a very hard race on seasonal debut in the Lismullen when they went quickly on deep ground he doesn't like. I assume they'll freshen him up now, and he won't be seen until Cheltenham at the earliest. He's 34.0 for the Stayers. He's no chance on this season's form. But if the vibes are good in the run-up to the meeting, that he's working much better, he could be an interesting outsider, a potential springer. Whether with Cheer Hoopu and honesty policy, Gordon's keen to run him's a moot point, but he's one to keep an eye on the vibes about.
Okay, maybe don't give up yet on the Yellow Clay. And Matt, we'll stick with you because we are going to cover a race we cover before Christmas, which is the Long Walk Hurdle, which has a couple of those new kids on the block in the Stayers Hurdle division. So where do they stack up versus Teahupoo?
Pretty good, I think. I thought this was a good race. It's historically was a very good trial. And overall, the Century winners 7 from 23, a slight loss, runners 8 from 78 in the Stayers. But when the British and the French dominated the race, this was a really good guide. Power shifted westwards across the Irish Sea. Its influence has waned. The last Stayers winner, it's produced Paisley Park in 28-19. But we've had, particularly in Britain, a number of years of really substandard division and a lot of old sweats still winning these races. This did look very different. So last year, Cheer Hoopu and Bob Ollinger were in their 5th season jumping. So you've got to imagine that some of these horses who are just starting into open company might be able to improve past them. It's the McManus pair who are 1st and 3rd, the obvious 2. In post-trial made it 3 out of 3 this season, extending his superiority over strong leader on £6 worse terms than in the long distance. He apparently shows nothing at home. Looks to be keeping a bit for himself on the track, so hard to gauge how good he is. He looked to idle in front here. My hunch is he's got a bit more in the locker, so he'll be a fascinating opponent for the top Irish Stayers come March. Some will be prejudiced against him because he's come through the handicap ranks. He won a Potemps qualifier off 148 on seasonal debut. 7 winners this century graduated from handicaps earlier in the season, and only Iris's Gift and Big Bucks were running off higher marks. So don't hold that handicap background against him. He's got good festival form as well. He was second to Jimmy DeSoy in the Coral Cup in March. He wore cheek pieces there. No headgear this season. Be worth keeping an eye on what the vibes are because he doesn't look straightforward. But 8.0 looks a bit big for the obvious up-and-coming force here. And the eye catcher, an obvious one, was honesty policy. He'd just been run out of it by Jasmine DeVoe in his first try at 3 miles at the Punchestown Festival. And the vibes are they hadn't had a clear run with him this season. So you'd think he'd improve a fair bit from this. But he was keen. He looked to blow up and then ran on strongly, be beaten just a length and a half. So showing plenty of stamina, cracking effort for a first try out of novice company. And so it's no surprise to see punters latch onto him for the stage, about 6.0. But Gordon said he may go straight there. I'd be a bit worried about that given how keen he was here. It'd be better if he could go for something like the Boyne. So I'm waiting to see what pans out. Entry to the Stayers Hurdle out next week. And that's often a good time to consider an anti-post bet. Horses do come from left field these days, and having a list of entries can obviously help you identify those horses. But it's shaping up into a more interesting Stayers than in the last couple of years. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Don, it is shaping up to be a great Stayers Hurdle, to be honest, with those 3 decent performances from the top 3 in the market. And Gordon's got a very strong hand here.
He does, yeah. No, it's there are different strands coming together for the Stayers Hurdle, Dan. And yeah, look, this was a really interesting race to watch. Like strong leader. I thought he ran well, but his record at Cheltenham, he's run there 5 times. He's beaten all 5 times. His record at entry, he's run there 3 times. and he's won twice, finished second behind In the Pocket in the Top Novices Hurdle, Grade 1 race over 2 miles. So you can understand if they're going to skip Cheltenham, although they did say that they might go to Cheltenham, but I wouldn't be with him at Cheltenham, but I'd keep an eye on him for entry again, of course. And Post like as Matt was saying, he's such an improved horse. When he ran the Coral Cup last season, he raced off a mark of 141, and now he's rated in the mid 150s. Stayed on really well to win this. He's run 3 times this season. He's won all 3. That entry, or the Pertemps qualifier that he won at entry on his debut this season, that was a race in which, remember, the flights in the home straight were taken out, as we'll come on to that in a second. We've had another one of those, and then he won at Newbury, and he's probably stepped forward again here. So yeah, big player in any Stayers Hurdle picture. But like that, I thought Honestly Policy ran a massive race. I'm sure most people copped onto it. It was his first run of the season, only his 6th run over hurdles in total. He's only just a 5-year-old, just turned 6, and the way he ran his race was interesting because he was a little bit further forward than Imposed Trois. He raced into the home straight in 2nd place. Then he seemed, as Matt said, to blow up a little bit, but then he stayed on really well, and to me that was impressive. Like, he won his maiden hurdle at Navan last season, just in February last year, or over a mile, 7.5 furlongs, not even 2 miles. And then he when he went to entry, it was the Mersey hurdle that he ran in over 2.5 miles, not the top. And then, as Matt said, ran a big race behind Jasmine Devon, the Grade 1 3 mile novices hurdle at the Punchestown Festival. So this was his test in open company, and to me, he passed it with flying colours. The way that he stayed on again was impressive. At the end of 3 miles, or an extended 3 miles, 3.5 miles a furlong, to go to the line as strongly as he did on his first run of the season, probably after blowing up. So big run by him. The first 3 finished well clear of the rivals as well. Potter's Charm ran well enough, just seemed to maybe find the trip at in this grade beyond him, maybe dropping back to an intermediate trip and maybe into a Coral Cup or something like that would be the thing for him. But Imposed to a big run, but Honestly Policy, yeah, Ken, if you had to take one out of the race, it would be Honestly Policy for me.
Okay, yeah, interesting Stayers hurdle ahead. I'm very much looking forward to the build up to that. We'll go to Relkeel hurdles, half relevant here, depending where Cabrel de Matan goes, although perhaps not going to the Stayers, because this was a joy to watch, Matt. Someone just constantly watching the favourite, and I was like, Harry's the only one that's going to get this beat as they're returning for home. But hugely impressive, and he backed up the confidence he was ridden with as well, I thought.
Yeah, I thought he was really, really good here. As you say, I don't think he's going to the Stayers hurdle. I wouldn't be going to that with him. He's very keen again, a bit like Ballyburn. Is he really going to stay 3 miles at this stage? He's only just turned 6. He looks a fair way short of the finished article. So, and I think Harry Skelton did say afterwards, Dan's been changing his mind every quote I've heard, but I think the latest one is National Spirit and then Aintree, which looks the right plan to me. If you drop him back to 2 miles, you're teaching him to race at that pace, and then you'll struggle to get him to peak next season as a 3 miler, which I think is the plan. You run him in the Stayers this season, you could bottom him, particularly if there's a hard run race. So he looks a cracking longer term prospect, not for this year's festival. And this hasn't been a good Stayers hurdle trial. Runners 1 from 34, including 11 Relkeel winners. A couple of interesting horses in behind, though, for this year's festival, both trained by Nicky Henderson, having failed to chasing. Last season, Jinko Blue looked like he might be a Broadway horse when winning the Hampton. Tipped up in the Reynoldstown, got injured. Been treated for kissing spines. This was his 2nd run back season, both over hurdles. He hasn't jumped well so far. So whether there's still a back issue, I don't know. He did pretty well in the circumstances to be 2nd, 5.5 lengths behind the winner. He's on 144 over hurdles, £7 below his chase mark. Be interested to see if Nicky tries to get him qualified for the Pertemps final. And we've had 10 of the 17 qualifiers. And some years you look at it and think, oh, they're half a dozen, I quite fancy this. Not many to fancy. Looks very open this year. So that's the target I would be having for him. And the other one was Lucky Place, who carried the full £6 penalty, having won the race last year. He was 2 lengths behind his stablemate in 3rd. Just the type Nicky does so well within the Coral Cup. A race where those with high marks have a good record. 7 of the last 13 winners being rated 145 or higher. And Nicky's won it in that period. Whisper off 153, William Henry off 151. Lucky Place was dropped £2 this morning to 151. So this may have been a pipe opener back over hurdles. He's one to keep an eye on for a big handicap in the spring, maybe the Coral Cup.
Okay, a couple of eye catchers in that race to take note of from Matt. Don, for you?
Yeah, Matt's covered it all really well there, Dan. I fully agree about Jinko Blue. He's a really interesting project, and he missed the last. I know Cabrel de Matan was traveling way better at the time. But he traveled really well down the hill, moved to the front around the home turn, and then whatever chance he had of putting it up to Cabral de Matan, that was ended with a mistake at the last. So he's only had 6 runs over hurdles. He had those 3 runs over fences as well. But yeah, he could be a potentially really well handicapped horse over hurdles now. Cabral de Matan, yeah, look, he's really interesting. He just oozed class. This 2.5 mile trip suits him well. And it's a race that the Relfield Hurdle, it's often won by a kind of a more of a wizened warrior. Like when Lucky Place won it last year, he was the first 6-year-old winner since 2019. And Lucky Place, of course, had Gall Road and Golden Ace behind him when he won the race last year, the champion hurdle winner. Who would have thought that? But Cabral de Matan, yeah, like Matt's covered him very well. He's a long-term project. You'd think Aintree would suit him really well. He won that handicap hurdle at Haydock there last time off a mark of 140. But yeah, that kind of flat track seems to suit him well. But look, he's a really exciting horse wherever he goes. He's obviously a young horse as well. But it was interesting that Dan Skelton saying afterwards that he probably wouldn't go to the Stairs Hurdle, definitely not go to the Champion Hurdle. And you can see the talk of dropping him down in trip because he does have lots of pace. But I think Dan Skelton was making the point that, as Matt said, if he did that, then that would teach him to race over 2 miles. And if you want him to settle better and be a 3 miler in time, that wouldn't be the step that you would take towards that goal. But no, big run by him. But no, I fully agree with Matt that Chinko Blue is the horse to keep in mind with handicap hurdles in mind.
Okay, and we'll move back to Leopardstown, cover the Mares Hurdle here. I know we've probably covered 2 potential Mares Hurdles contenders, Don, but one of their stablemate, Woodhoo for Gordon Elliott, she again keeping that winning form going, very impressive overall, but impressive in a Woodhoo race rather than maybe being ultimately impressive. And beat Feet of a Dancer, who you think is potentially a horse to take out of this race.
Yeah, like Woodhoo, she's such an admirable mare. Like she's just brilliant what she does. And it was a similar performance to the performance she put up at Ascot when she won on her debut this season. Danny Gilligan rode it that day, and he just had to give her a little bit of a squeeze along down the side of the track before the turn for home. But when they turned for home, she really, her turbo kicked in, and she won really impressively there. Similar at Leopardstown, like if you're taking some of the 8 to 15. She just was being just kind of not ridden along or anything like it, but just kind of squeezed along a little bit by Jack Kennedy. But then once she turned for home, she like if you didn't know the horses and didn't know their styles of racing, you would have said that Feet of a Dancer was traveling better than she was. But again, her turbo kicked in. She stayed on really well, and she was fastest through the final 4 furlongs. She was fastest through the final furlong as well. And yeah, she's won 9 over 10 hurdle races now. Her only defeat was at the hands of Lossiemouth in the entry hurdle last season when she finished second behind her. Another race with Constitution Hill fell, but this 2.5 mile trip seems to suit her really well. If she had to go one way, up or down in trip, you'd kind of go up in trip, wouldn't you, instead of down in trip? But the Mares Hurdle is over 2.5 miles, as luck would have it. So it's obviously the race for her. I don't think she's going to run between now and then. She doesn't need to. She's a Martin Pipe Hurdle winner as well, so she's got Cheltenham Festival winning form. And yeah, she's just such a likable mare. Feet of a Dancer, yeah, I thought she ran well, and we'll come on to her in Eyecatchers maybe, but yeah, I thought she ran well on ground that was probably quicker than ideal for her. She was pretty well supported in the market beforehand, but she's a mare, Paul Nolan's mare, who does get further and is probably unexposed over further as well. She probably needed either softer ground or a longer trip to be at her best. That said, she did win over 2.25 miles at Fairyhouse on her debut this season, but that was on softer ground. She travelled really well through a race. Dream On Baby, who finished third and who led early on, like she won a listed hurdle at Kempton on her previous run on this kind of goodish ground, and that suits her well. And Feet of a Dancer came away from her, and she finished third. But she ran the Pretemps final last season, Feet of a Dancer, in which things didn't really go her way. But yeah, she's a I think a mare to keep in mind, which we'll come on to maybe in Eyecatchers and go into a little bit more depth on her.
Okay, yeah, and what potential race she could be set up for. And Matt, your thoughts on maybe the winner and the runner-up as well?
Yeah, just looking at the stats first here. Runners 1 from 32 in the Mares Hurdle. Winners finishing 0, 3, 0, 6, 3, 5, 2, 9, 5. So you think, oh, that's a bad record. But you need to remember that Grade 1 winners aren't eligible for this race. So 10 of the last 15 Mares Hurdle winners couldn't have run here. They'd already won a Grade 1. So if you do get a top-notch mare running, as we did with Woodhoo, you don't use this modest record against her chances at Cheltenham, as ever trends need reading in context. Absolutely agree with what Don was saying, particularly about that point about Who sometimes looks like she's not travelling well and she's quite deceptive. I think she's one of those horses, doesn't have a dazzling turn of foot. She just keeps quickening the gallop. And as Don said, if anything, you go up in trip rather than down. So I think the new course, the extra 76 yards, the stiffer test should suit her really well and might suit Lossiemouth a little bit less. When they clashed in the Aintree hurdle, they didn't go that quickly and Lossiemouth had too much speed for Who. But then Who was a second season hurdle, having her first running graded conditions races there. She could improve past what Lossiemouth was then a fourth season hurdle, having a 13th start in graded races. So I don't think it's clear cut that Lossiemouth is just going to beat her again. I think it'd be a fascinating clash if it happens. Who's not a natural front runner. On the old course, the mare's hurdle kept turning into a sprint. So either the shape of the field needs to lend itself to a stronger up, or Gordon needs to run something else to provide it. Otherwise, I think if it did turn into a steadily run race, then Lossiemouth will be too quick for her. So I'm holding fire for that now. I'm a big fan of Feet of a Dancer. I backed her for the Attempts final last year. So I'll leave her to Dom. I'm very interested to hear where he might think she is going to run at the festival this year. Let's
stay tuned to the end of the episode, listener and viewer. We're flying through it now. Formby Novices Hurdle. Matt, you don't have a trend here, but so you have some context re the Tallworth and a few other things.
Yeah, absolutely no trend because we've only had 2 renewals. But so far, Potter's Charm last year, 5th in the Bearing Bingham. Previous year, 2 beaten horses finished 6th and 10th in the Supreme. The thing is, the ground here. Now, this year it was okay, but as is so often the case, it's awful at Aintree, even worse than at Sandown on the hurdles track. So whether it's going to be the sort of race big trainers are going to want to send their best prospects to on that prevailing ground, we'll see. The Tolworth has been a pretty good guide. 3 winners had followed up in the Supreme, 2 in the Bearing Bingham this century. And this year we had the much hyped My Daddy Paddy. Last season, Dan Skelton had been similarly bullish about the new Lion and his confidence proved well placed. Wasn't the case here, but the race was ruined by the 2 hurdles in the straight being taken out. So the form by definition becomes unreliable. My Daddy Paddy been good at his obstacles, losing just 1.29 miles an hour compared to Idaho Sun's 2.14. Visually, he looked a slicker jumper. So the obvious argument is that he was the one inconvenienced by the hurdles being taken out. But he was last off the bridle. He didn't find anything like as much as the winner. He was eased close home, but he was beaten, 3 1/4 lengths pretty easily. Totally different race with the hurdles in, but he was very much second best here. Perhaps the winner finds loads for pressure. My Daddy Paddy was 8 lengths clear of the third, but maybe he's a bit of a bridle merchant. That may be unfair. This was the first battle he's had, so perhaps he just needed to learn from that. And he's a shorter in the market than the winner, though, at 15.0. I'd have him as the less likely winner of the Supreme of the 2 at this stage. And I thought Idaho Sun showed a great attitude, travelled well. He did get first run, but he just looked the better horse in the context of the test here without the hurdles in the straight. He jumped okay, not as slickly as the runner-up. His turn of foot would be a potent weapon in the Bearing Bingham, but he's heading for the Supreme. Harry Forrest seems pretty clear about that. Slight concern about him not coming down the hill too well in the bumper last year, but that may have been greenness, and I think Brian Carver did get a bit unbalanced, so maybe that's a red herring. But with the novice hurdling picture in Ireland more embryonic than usual after the Christmas festivals, especially with the Mullins horses, I haven't dipped my toes into the water in the festival novice hurdle markets yet. But if I were given a free bet in the Supreme, Idaho Sun at 17.0 might be the one I'd go for.
Okay, yeah. Don, My Daddy Paddy, a bridal merchant for you?
Yeah, I think he was probably, it's easy in hindsight, but he was probably sent off at an artificially short price because of the kind of hype that accompanied him. Like Idaho Sun, he won his 2 hurdle races going into this. He won 2 of his 3 bumpers last season. His only defeat, as Matt was saying, was in the champion bumper, in which he finished 6th. He was only a length and a half behind Alcaraz in the champion bumper. And I was really impressed with Idaho Sun here, and he may not have gotten the recognition that he deserved. Like, he was a little bit keen through the early part of the race. He was always prominent. And as Matt was saying, My Daddy Paddy did travel better than him into the home straight. And he's a good jumper, so maybe the omission of the 2 hurdles may not have been in My Daddy Paddy's favour. That said, Idaho Sun was out in front, and I always feel that a front runner, the hurdles or fences when they're in, they kind of concentrate your mind and they make it easier to make the running or to stay in front like that. Whereas when someone's in behind, they have you as a target, and with no obstacles in the way, it's more straightforward to go and try and pick you up. But Idaho Sun, didn't travel as well as the runner-up until maybe about a furlong and a half out on the run to the omitted final flight. But he found lots of pressure. He stayed on well. He won by over 3 lengths in the end. It was a really strong performance. Finishing speed was 105% of overall speed, so fairly well run race without being run at a breakneck pace. But Idaho's Son found plenty of it. I think he might do better in an even better run race. He can settle a little bit better, and he obviously sees out this 2 mile 1 furlong trip really well. So yeah, I thought there was a lot to like about Idaho's Son. I don't think My Daddy Paddy would have beaten him, even if they'd gone on further. And who knows with the last 2 flights in. But I thought Idaho's Son, given the structure of the test with which they were presented, he was the winner on merit. He won it well. My Daddy Paddy, he's a good horse, but just may not be as good as the reputation that he had going into the race.
Okay, we'll keep a novice hurdling. Go to Challow, Matt. It feels every week we're talking about no drama at this end, but another win to add to the CV, in fairness to him.
Yeah, and it's great to see these horses running, isn't it? Third race in just over 6 weeks. He'll be freshened up now. And so this is one of the most famous stats, of course, that winners are now 1 from 22 in the Bearing Bingham. And it's a good illustration of how to use and how not to use trends. So the reason Challow winners always got beaten in the Bearing Bingham was that the Challow tended to be run on testing ground, be a bit of a slog. Horses that running over this trip at this point of the season, often embryonic stayers, Bearing Bingham usually steadily run, real test of speed at the trip. And the 2 races just suit different types in a typical year. But if you get much better ground in the Challow and they go more steadily than usual, the New Lion wins it with a big turn of foot, then he ought to have a better chance in the Bearing Bingham than a typical Challow winner, and especially if his 2 main rivals, the Yellow Clan Final Demand, are embryonic 3-milers. So you look at the trend in the context of this year's races. What it does not mean is that you now ignore the trend. 1 from 22, when the last 13 Challow winners have all gone off single-figure prices in the Bearing Bingham, 3 of them favourites, is still a really poor guide. So we don't know the other half of it yet, which speedy types with a Grade 1 form at 2 miles who dominate the Bearing Bingham will run. But we can assess no drama this end from the nature of this season's Challow. And they went steadily, decent ground. So again, he oozed class, looked a bit lazy, maybe a bit green going round there. Maybe he's a bit flat 3 runs in 6 weeks. But when it came to it, he brushed them aside with the minimum of fuss, showed his versatility as to ground conditions. And so good ground. The time was nearly 4 seconds slower than the handicap, won by 127 rated Andershang, carrying 4 pounds more earlier in the afternoon. So emphasis on speed. This wasn't a typical Challow slog. And there'll be plenty of clock watchers using that to knock no drama this end. But remember, a fast time from a strongly run race, really an indication of a good ability in a strongly run race. Just as horses who win a crawl might not excel in a fast run race, those who excel in a fast run race may not be suited by a crawl. And where the target, as here the Bearing Bingham, is typically steadily run, form in steadily run intermediate trip races can be an underestimated guide, especially with lots of punters who focus on time backing those form in fast run intermediate trip races. So in summary, no drama this end, doesn't look the archetypal Challow slogger, but as we've discussed twice already in this series, history suggests Paul Nicholls won't trade him as hard as some of the others in the field will be. And for me, he still remains one who's likely to come into his own over fences in due course. Of the others, Clint Madrick last, and so ill-suited by the way the race developed. He ran on well without threatening. He'd be worth a try at 3 miles. And his old rival, Kalkbrenner, apparently wasn't suited by the good ground, so could be forgiven for this. But my hunch remains what we said the 2 previous occasions, no drama. This end is a run. He may be the best long-term prospect in this year's Bearing Bingham, but my guess is he won't win it.
Yeah, and for new listeners, Bearing Bingham is obviously the Turners Novices Hurdle, just if you're a little bit stuck, but Matt sticks with the original names, which in fairness, you look at the racing post, Matt, it's in brackets, the Bearing Bingham, so you're well entitled to that.
Well, it's only because it's so hard to remember all the changes of names. The Turners used to sponsor the 2.5 mile novice chase. And everyone calls the Arkle, and the Supreme, but we call the Spa the Albert Bartlett. It's just trying to make it as easy as possible to remember the names. It's not me trying to be clever, I promise.
No. Neptune, Ballymore, that feels better than the Turners and the Bearing Bingham. But anyway, Don, no drama this
Houston was a different race as well. we've got 2 Christmas hurdles.
There's a lot going on, Don. But is Matt Ultley right? It is probably a vulnerable favourite considering Paul Nicholls. We've seen it before, Brave Man's Game, that, chasing is the name of the game, which is fair enough for him.
Yeah, look, I agree with a lot of what Matt said. I thought No Drama this end, and I still think that he probably has to live up to his reputation. Like he's been so well touted, and look, he's deserved an awful lot of it. He's obviously a top class horse. References to Denman have probably, unfairly given him a reputation that's very, very tall, and he's going to have to obviously. He's going to have to be very, very good if he's to live up to that. But look, he's a top class horse. He did this really well. Just reading Paul Nicholls said afterwards, he told Harry Cobden to go and ride him like the best horse in the race, which he did. He got out in front. He set a steady pace. Matt said that it was a slowly run race. The finishing speed was 112% of overall speed. So that suited a horse to be ridden prominently. And he was the best horse in the race anyway. He probably would have won however the race had been run. But it just may be, it's all about when we're looking at, a Cheltenham trail or looking at Cheltenham races or markets on Cheltenham races, it's about the price relative to his chance or a horse's chance of winning. And for me, No Drama this end, I thought he was underpriced in the shallow hurdle. I was against him. He won. I think he's going to continue to be a horse who has a tall reputation, and I think he's going to be priced up accordingly. So, I think that he's probably going to be shorter in the market wherever he goes now, or on to Cheltenham or even beyond. I thought Clint Maddock ran a big race. I think I put him up as an eye catcher before on here after he won the last day. And if I hadn't, I would have put him up here as an eye catcher because he was well back in the field, as Matt said. He stayed on really well. The ground probably wasn't as soft as he would have ideally liked it. He probably needs a stronger test over 2.5 miles than he got here. And for me, I thought he ran a big race. He met Kalkbrenner on worse terms compared to the terms in which they met at Newbury last time when he beat him. Matt said Kalkbrenner wasn't suited by the ground, so you can allow him that. But I thought Clint Maddock did well to just get the better of Tip Top Tim for the runner-up spot. And I'm not sure where he's going to go next or what he's going to do, but he's an under-the-radar type of horse from a relatively small yard in Toby Laws. And I think stepping up in trip to 3 miles will see him in a better light. He's from the family of Lord de Menil, and he's only had 3 runs over hurdles. He ran in 2-pointed points, but I didn't think he got the credit that he should have got for his win the last day at Newbury. I don't think he's got the credit that he should have got for this run here to finish second behind No Drama at this end. And I think with a stronger test or softer ground, that'll see him in a much better light. So for me, Clint Maddock, he remains a horse to keep in mind.
Okay, we'll move on to the Future Champions Novice Hurdle. It's been around and been a Grade 1 since 2008, Matt. So hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the race. We obviously had the huge drama at the last where Talk the Talk looked like it was going well until he fell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good renewal of this race. Yeah, overall, essentially, the stats aren't that encouraging. 2 from 27, the Supreme, 1 from 17, the Bearing Bingham. But the record of Future Champions winners is pretty good. As you said, Daniel, it came a Grade 1 2008. Since then, they finished 3-3, 6-2, 1, P2-3 in the Supreme and 0-1 in the Bearing Bingham. So with the Willie Mullins novices well behind this season, whether by accident or design, the Royal Bomb winner bleeding here. Some will want to knock this form, but my hunch is it will prove better than punters think. And the 2 horses battling it out, who may be Grade 1 novices in the spring, not just at Christmas. Don's going to talk about Talk the Talk. So I'll leave most of that to him. I just said coming into this, I thought that defeat of I'm Slippy, who I think is a good horse in that 4-year-old race at Fairyhouse, is an exciting prospect. So it'd be very interesting to see where he's going to go. He is up for sale, so you have to take the comments in that context. And Kevin Blake said in his column that he'd be better up in trip. The vibes are that he's going to go for the Supreme. He's 11.0 for the Supreme, 26.0 for the Bearing Bingham. I'd be very interested for the latter with the speed he's got. And another issue is he could be sold. So like Hallwell Potter 2 years ago, you could miss the Spring Festival while he acclimatises. So he'd be a dangerous anti-post proposition at the moment, but I'll let Don talk about everything. He's a really good horse, as is Skylight Hustle, who I think was beaten at the last. Keen going type, he's free on herding debut at Gordon. He has looked to settle better with experience. Each race he looks more professional. Really good sign that he's going to keep improving. Gordon did say that he didn't have him that well in the ring. He wasn't impressed with his head. So again, might well improve for that. He stayed on strongly here in the light of a horse who could run in either the Supreme or the Bearing Bingham. He's 26.0 for that, 21.0 for the Supreme. El Kairos seems to be the stable number one for Supreme. So perhaps they'll keep these two apart, Ballyfad and one or two others in the mix as well. So with the Mullins novices being slow burners, the markets are embryonic, and you'd be a little bit cautious about taking a strong view at this stage. But I think both Talk the Talk and Skylight Hustle could well be big players come the festival.
Okay, yeah, Don, just take those top two horses that Matt's mentioned there. Good renewal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like watching the race live, and I was with Talk the Talk, I thought he was going to win. But actually watching the replay, and Gordon Elliott made this point as well, Skylight Hustle, he was only about a half length behind jumping the last. And while Talk the Talk had come from behind and passed him, the strength with which Skylight Hustle went to the line, it's not conclusive in my mind that Talk the Talk would have won. Look, we'll never know, but he did look like the most likely winner when he came to the last, and he showed a really good turn of foot. He was fastest of all through the penultimate furlong to go and hit the front. He looked like he was going to win it, and he actually jumped the final flight like a horse who had lots of energy left. He kind of overjumped it and landed a little bit steeply, and kind of a novice fall. It was only his third run over hurdles, but I agree with Matt and on his previous run. When he beat I'm Slippy in that grade 3 race, he had Marcia behind him in I think third place as well, and I know she was a little bit weak in the market beforehand. She's the anniversary hurdle winner from last season. Wendrock was behind as well, and he ran well to finish fifth in the 2.5 mile handicap hurdle at Leopardstown in a race that wasn't run to suit. So Talk to Talk, he had rock solid form going into the race. He was probably going to go and win it, and if he had won it, he would have beaten for me a good horse in Skylight Hustle. Like he split the devil, in the Passing Wife at Goran Park, and then he went and won seriously impressively at Ferryhouse. But as Matt made the point, it would be interesting to see where the Gordon Elliott horses go, because Alcaraz, like he would have won as well had he not come down at the final flight. And Skylight Hustle, just the strength at which he went to the line, it may be that he'll be able to go out and trip. He's a half sister to Sean Says as well, and she won over distances from 2 miles to 3 miles. So it wouldn't be surprising if Skylight Hustle were to go up and trip for the Burying Bingham or the Turner's Hurdle, and Alcaraz were to go to the Supreme. Talk the Talk though, look, he's probably, as often happens with unlucky losers or fallers, he may be overbet next time, even more so than if he'd gone and won the race. So that's always a little bit of a worry. But yeah, look, he's a really likable horse and definitely worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, it's always the way, especially with Joined Up Thinking. There's so many podcasts as well, so everyone analyzes not the same, but comes to similar conclusions, and therefore, is overbet. Therefore, that's not a rule, but it does happen. We're going to cover the juveniles now. I just want to read out the stat for the Doran's Pride Novice Hurdle. We had to take something out. This is the 2 mile 7. Obviously, in Limerick, runners are 5 out of 26 in the Albert Bartlett. This is a stat from Matt. So you will be 64-point profit, which is and 46%. So that just shows you a race to keep in mind in terms of the Albert Bartlett. But we'll go to the Changing Times Brewery Juvenile Hurdle. Incidentally, the Changing Times Brewery, I think, are trying to take on Diageo, owned by a lot of pubs. So fair play to them getting involved, sponsoring a race at Leopardstown over Christmas. Matt, hit us with your trend and your thoughts that we now have a new Triumph Hurdle favourite.
We do. And about that Doran's Pride, the Albert Bartlett, just to reiterate, very much a race to be betting on during festival week. So that Doran's Pride is a race you need to be rewatching come March because it's such a good guide. Changing Times Brewery Juvenile, in theory, this is an early Triumph trial, but winners 1 from 17, runners 2 from 48. So it does produce the odd winner. But in the juvenile division, things change very quickly. It's unusual for there to be a lossy mouth who stamps their authority early on in the season on the division and then wins the Triumph. Yeah, horses improve or regress in all divisions, but juveniles often more so than older horses. So my 2 basic rules are: 1, don't get carried away with the early graded juvenile form. But more importantly, 2, don't discount the beaten horses. 18 winners of this ran in the spring juvenile at DRF. Only 3 completed the double. By contrast, 7 horses beaten here won the spring. So in stark contrast to Britain, where the best juveniles spread between lots of races, they tend to reoppose more in Ireland. The races are deeper. And that ought to make these races fertile ground for the Fred Winter. And the trend is runners 3 from 46, 54.116% profit. Now, in this race itself, second season hurdlers ought to have a big advantage of experience in 3-year-old races at this stage of the season. It may not be experience in terms of lots of races. This was just Narciso Ha's third start. but its hurdling experience over a relatively long period, including being trained as a hurdler at home last season. Don't get sucked into thinking because he didn't run on the flat, he's automatically going to improve stacks over the next few weeks. He may do. He's a juvenile, but equally he may have done plenty of his improving over hurdles, given he won in April. So 6.0 wouldn't interest me for the Triumph. Monge 2 had race fitness on her side, but was carrying a £4 penalty when beating him at Fairyhouse, and she's 11.0, which to me puts his price in context. For me, it's still the clue gathering stage for the Triumph. And for the Fred Winter, I put In My Teens up as an eye catcher in the first episode of the series as a Fred Winter project, not in between. She's qualified now. An interesting race IQ data metric about her. She was first here in terms of entry speed at hurdles, but worst in terms of speed lost. And a similar story in a hurdling debut at Punchestown. Now, the obvious conclusion is simply she's a talented horse who jumps slowly, and that may well be it. But I wonder if it's an indication of a handicap project, if they're steadied into and allowed to fiddle their way over obstacles cautiously. I'm very much at the novice stage of using the race IQ data, but that's something I'll be keeping an eye on. And In My Teens is 17.0 in the early betting for the Fred Winter.
Wow. So we had that debate at Race IQ a few weeks ago. If Race IQ starts finding out a few handicap projects, that could be a very interesting use of Race IQ data. Don, for you on this race specifically?
Yeah, I thought the winner was very good, Dan. And he probably came forward from his run at Fairyhouse when Monge 2 beat him. But yeah, I think the disparity in their respective odds for the Triumph Hurdle is bigger than it should be. That said, he did this really well. He was really strong in the market, sent off 2.1 in the end, and he led from the third last. He stayed on well. He came right away from his rivals. He was over a second faster through the final 4 furlongs than his fastest rival, who was Adrienne, and she ran well. She stayed on well just to get the better of North Shore for the runner-up spot, just in front of Gavin Cromwell's horse. But Narciso had, it was only his third run over hurdles, only his second run for Willie Mullins. He came forward from his run at Fairyhouse, and there's every chance he's going to come forward again. He stays well as well. His dam won a listed chase over 2 miles and 3 furlongs, and he's a kind of a big juvenile as well. Similar role to Majbur, actually, who won the Triumph Hurdle in 2024, 2 years ago, who was a big juvenile as well for the same connections, Jacob McManus and Willie Mullins. So Narciso, and he looks uncomplicated as well. Narciso he was able to go forward and go on from the third last. So yeah, he's got plenty to like about him for all that he is. He is short enough now in the Triumph Hurdle market. North Shore, I thought, ran well on his first run over hurdles, and he was only just deprived of the runner-up spot by Adrienne. And that, he should come forward from that, given that it was his first run over hurdles. Barbazan, I thought, was a bit disappointing. He won his maiden hurdle well at Navan. He beat Ben-Hur in that, and he beat Ben-Hur again here into 5th place. He was a classy horse off the flat. He reached a rating of 101 on the flat for John Murphy, and just having a second run now over hurdles for Gordon Elliott. Thought he looked really good in his maiden hurdle. Just didn't go forward from that here, and he was well beaten in the end. He only finished 4th in the end. So maybe that's as good as he is, but I suspect that he's probably better than he was able to show here for whatever reason, and he might get a little bit closer to the winner the next time they meet. But no, I thought the winner won well, and in winning as well as he did, I thought he paid a good compliment as well to Monge 2, and she remains a filly of interest for me for the Triumph Hurdle.
Okay, plenty to dissect from that race. Incidentally, the finale juvenile at Chepstow, runners are 2 out of 45 in the Triumph, 17% loss, and 0 out of 43 in the Fred Winter. Just a race we don't have time to cover in the main section. We're going to eye catchers now. Matt, you have 3.
Yeah, and inevitably much debate about Mullins, hurdlers, no shows in the future champions, not great in the maiden hurdles at Leopardstown. But there was a taking performance at Limerick from You Proof. Very keen, a little bit green in the 2 mile 5 maiden there. Still sprinted clear off a steadily run race, 116% finishing speed from King's Bucks, who got within 3 1/4 lengths of No Drama this end in a more truly run Hyde at Cheltenham. And this was the maiden Final Demand won last year. Whilst historically Willie hasn't sent that many of his gun novices to Limerick, he is a creature of habit, and Willie's mentality is when something new works, repeat it. So despite being a bit lukewarm in his column, perhaps You Proof is one of his better novices. Danny was saying he'd be a stayer in the spring, but he looked to have a decent turn of foot here. Perhaps he'll settle better with the freshness out of him, so stay well. I'm open-minded about what his spring target would be, but I was impressed with this visually. He could be a grade 1 horse, so he's one to keep an eye on. With modern spring-focused training methods, the maidens at Christmas stronger these days, sometimes more of a pointer to the festival than the Grade 1s. The 4-year-old 2 Mile Maiden at Leopardstown on Stephen's Day has produced 2 of the last 7 supreme winners in Kopek the Board and Classical Dream. And the first 3, any of them could have been eye catchers here. Vibes are Ballyfad's quicker on the track than he is at home, and surprised Gordon Elliott, as mentioned earlier. He does seem to be behind El Kairos and Skylight Hustle in the trainer's pecking order. He might be underestimated. Leader Dalio's well touted for the Mullins camp beforehand. Vibes are he blew up, so he's worth another chance. I've tried to pick out a less obvious one, and this is the 10 lengths third, Joseph O'Brien Shoda. She improved £9 on the flat in 4 runs over the summer, winning her final start over 2 miles at Clonmel to get a rating of 88. And this was her 3rd hurdle start. She's got a mark now, 117, just £29 higher than the flat mark. She was really keen here on her return to the tempo of hurdling after 106 days off. So with that under her belt, she should improve, hopefully be better than 117. And of Joseph's 5 festival winners, 4 ran at Leopardstown or Limerick at Christmas before winning 2 Fred Winters, 2 Martin Pipes. I don't know if Shoda's quite good enough for a Martin Pipe. 2 of the last 3 years, the cut's been 126, but I'm optimistic she can win a decent race before the season's out. And the final one is Nicky Henderson's Charisma, who was a close second in a mare's novice at Huntington over 2 miles just before Christmas. She went off 1.57, jumped well, looked to have the race at her mercy, but wasn't asked for anything before the last. Wasn't that fluent at it, didn't quite get there. And as a result, she's been left on 127. Having had 4 starts now, she's eligible for the big handicap hurdle at Newbury next month. I think that's now the William Hill. Nicky's won that 6 times this century, 7 in all, including the last 2 years with another mare, Joyous, and with the Birico Lord, who, like Charisma, are owned by JP McManus. And if she would run there, she'd have the 5th run to be eligible for the festival handicap. So she definitely looks a handicap project.
Okay, that's You Prove Shoda and Charisma. Don, for you, starting with Talk the Talk that we mentioned.
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much most on Talk the Talk, Dan. Like, I just liked him as a horse going into the race. He was unlucky to fall. Not certainly a beaten Skylight Hustle. If they both stood up, given the strength of the pitch, Skylight Hustle went to the line. It might have been close between the 2 of them, but he did look like the most likely winner when he came down. It was only his 3rd run over hurdles. He was actually supplemented to the race. His dam's a half-sister to the dam of Goshen and Ellie May, so a nicely bred horse as well. And the form of his win in the Fairy House Grade 3 race when he beat Amsteppy and Murcia, that was solid form. So look, he's not high profile, or sorry, he's not low profile or anything like it, but I still think he's a likable horse and one to keep on the right side of for now at least. Second one was Feel of a Dancer. We covered her a little bit as well. Like, she finished 2nd behind a top class mare in Woodoo, and she travelled really well into her race. It was over an extended 2.5 miles on good to yielding ground. She probably needs a stronger test to be at her best. While she won over 2.25 miles at Fairy House on her debut this season, that was on soft ground. She's a mare who's probably better on softer ground. She finished 3rd behind Maxima, really close up 3rd in the Grade 2 at Fairy House back in April last year over 2.5 miles on soft ground. But interesting, as Matt was saying, it's going to be interesting to see where she goes now. She ran the Pretense last season and she ran a big race. She was back in the field early on in a race that had a finishing speed of 108%, so it was difficult to come from the rear. 5 of the first 7 home raced in mid-division or better from early, and I thought she did well to get as close as she got. She was off a mark of 136 last season. She's 139 now in Ireland, probably a little bit higher in Britain, but not too much higher, you would imagine. And Paul Nolan did say at the start of the season that he wouldn't want her carrying big weights in handicaps. So 100 mark of 139 or maybe 100 very early 140s, that would see her probably with a decent weight in a Pretense final, a normal Pretense final. Maybe there's the option to claim offer, but I think key to her is either easy ground or a staying trip. She's only run 3 times over 2 miles 7 or further, so I think she's still fairly unexposed over staying trips. And she's at her best when she's fresh. She's had 7 runs after a break of 60 days or more, and 8 runs. She's won 4 of them and finished 3rd twice and 4th once. So she does have a really good record fresh, which she ran in the Pretense last season. It was her first run since Christmas, so it wouldn't be surprising if Paul Nolan left her off now and just brought her back for Cheltenham. And the 3rd horse is Come Walk With Me for Eddie Cawley. I thought he ran a big race in the hurdle race, the Novices Handicap Hurdle at Leopardstown on the final day of the festival. I thought it was a slowly run race. He was back in the field early on, and it was difficult to make ground into the quickening pace. The finishing speed was 110% of overall speed. He's only had 6 runs over hurdles. He hasn't managed to win yet, but he finished second behind Redemption Day at Naas last season. He finished second behind Honesty Policy in that 2-mile hurdle race at Navan that we were talking about earlier on. And he was fastest of all here through the final 4 furlongs and through the final furlong. And that was after kind of a little peck on landing over the second last. He's trained by Eddie Cawley. Maybe that Fairy House will be, there'll be a good race for him at the Easter meeting. Eddie Cawley is always a man to be respected at the Meath meetings, especially Fairy House. 2.5 miles is a good trip for him. So I think he's a horse who just could be a little bit ahead of his handicap mark.
Okay, let's talk the talk, feed of an answer, and come walk with me for Don. We're done. Got it over the hour a little bit, but we did quite well overall, guys. And there was plenty to cover in our Christmas review. Part 1, hurdles. Christmas review, part 2, chases, will be available in early next week. So check your podcast feeds or keep an eye on our YouTube channel for when we upload that. But my thanks once again to Matt and Don. We're going to count down to the Cheltenham Festival. Post the Christmas reviews, will be going race by race and the big races. So stay tuned for that. Plenty of exciting time out of the DRF and then on to the Cheltenham Festival and the rest of the spring festivals. Enjoy the week sport. We'll chat to you next week. Bye-bye.